Hi, it's Nikki here with this week's 3View. Now, as you guys know, my whole passion in life is around creating leaders who create conditions for people to do their best work. So as part of that, of course, I read as much as I can on the topic of leadership. And so this little weekly 3View is to give you a little insight into either a recent or sometimes a classic book on leadership or management, give you 3 key takeaways and a mark out of 3. And I do try and wrap it all up in roughly 3 to 5 minutes, although sometimes I get a bit excited and go over time. So this week we are going to be looking at one of my all-time favorites, Simon Sinek. Simon's latest book is called The Infinite Game. Now, most of you probably have heard of Simon from his very famous TED Talk and book, which we all know as Start With Why, which is all about finding your why and then that driving your behavior in life and in business. The Infinite Game delves a lot deeper into that and expands quite dramatically on that concept of what is driving your activity. The phrase, the infinite game, is not one that Simon Sinek invented. It was a guy called James P. Cass. But in reading his book, Simon got to thinking about the applicability of that to creating the kind of business world that he wants to see, where people come to work inspired, they're at work and they're safe, and they come home fulfilled. That's his just cause, his mission in life. So the first insight is, well, what is an infinite game? So it helps to contrast it with a finite game. A finite game is a game of sport, for example. You know who the players are, there are really defined rules, there's a defined time frame, and the whole aim of it is to have a winner and a loser. Infinite game is pretty much the opposite of that. You don't really necessarily know who all the players are, and new players can come in and out at any time. There's no end to the game. There's no defined end to the game that you're aware of. So it's a bit like life, our lives. We don't know when the end of our lives will be. And the rules vary greatly, and you often don't know what they are, apart from the basic kind of laws of the land of every country. So the first deep insight really is that a lot of the problems we see in business relate to the fact that people are trying to play a finite game in what is in fact an infinite world. Business should not be played like a finite game because there's no end point. Arguably, there's not winners and losers. There might be kind of along the way, but at the end of the game, that's not how it works. And you don't know who all the players are. New people can come in or out at any time, and the rules are different depending on where you are in the world and depending on how you conduct it yourself. So by acting as if it's a finite game and talking constantly about winning and crushing the competition and being number one, you start to drive behaviors which take the company a long way from what the desired state is. So the argument is that by playing win-lose finite game, we're going to be number one by this date, you're actually driving a whole series of aberrant behaviors that lead corporations to be very destructive and toxic places to be. The second insight is that one of the key things that can happen with this very finite mindset is what Simon calls ethical fading. So this is where we see, and sometimes we see, egregious breaches of ethics, like creating bank accounts for dead people, or mining people's data without their knowledge. The contention is that most people don't set out to do that. Most people don't set out to be evil purveyors of toxic corporate behavior. But when things are run in a finite way, where you're trying to hit this number by this time to satisfy this shareholder or this market analyst or whoever it is, that is going to drive a whole series of policies, behaviors, and look the other ways that mire you in behavior that becomes increasingly unethical. If you are not pursuing what Simon calls in this book the just cause, or the higher cause, if you're not looking up and going, actually, where we're really trying to go is here. We're really all about, for example, in the banking sector, we're about providing the money that fuels the facilitation of people's lives and businesses. Okay, that's a big higher cause. If you're thinking about that, then you're not opening accounts for dead people, right? But if you're thinking about, oh my God, we've got to make our bonus numbers for next month, otherwise I'm going to get sacked, then you're opening the accounts for the dead people. It's exacerbated by the usage of euphemisms and language that tries to change the nature of what you're doing or who you're doing it to, for example. He uses the great example of torture. No one likes the idea of torture, so we use the phrase enhanced interrogation because it sounds better and it leads to less questions. We also start to fade away. We start by saying, well, you know, as long as it's not illegal, as if, you know, and we've heard Zuckerberg at Facebook talk about the fact that government needs to regulate these things. Well, why? If we sit down and say, is this right? Is this a proper thing to be doing? Is this an appropriate and ethical thing to be doing? Given that we have a just cause that is about connecting people worldwide, why do we need governments to legislate something that we're already sitting there and saying we think is wrong? And then even beyond that, you can get to a situation in certain industries where everyone is effectively breaking the law or finding ways to wiggle around it. So therefore the ethical fading is, well, they're doing it, so we have to do it, because if we don't do it, we're going to lose the finite game because we're not playing the infinite game. So that's ethical fading and how it's really driven by that finite mindset. The third piece around the infinite game or the infinite mindset, which is probably a better way to put it when you're thinking about how you approach business, is my favorite topic at the moment, courage. Courage in leadership. Because you see, the thing is this, at the moment, most people in business are playing the finite game. So for most leaders, it feels courageous to step back and say, no, we're going to make this decision that in the short term might hurt us financially, might look silly, might make us very famous in the news when we kind of want to keep our heads down. And the great example of that is CVS, the drugstore company in the US, that a couple of years ago decided to stop selling cigarettes. Now, they did this for a really explicit reason. Their just cause was helping people live healthier lives. And when they sat down and talked about it, they went, that's not part of that. It can't be part of that. That decision had massively derogatory short-term implications, right? They were pilloried by the markets. They were pilloried by the analysts. People said they were crazy because, you know, people are going to go buy cigarettes from their competitors and their stock price would be hammered and they'd have to lay off people, et cetera, et cetera. But they stuck to their guns and they said, well, this is our higher cause. This is what we're in business for. So we cannot be in the business of selling cigarettes to people. So ultimately, history shows that financially, they're in a stronger position now than they were back then. History also shows that apparently overall cigarette sales across the US fell by about 1% when they made that decision. So sure, some people went elsewhere for their cigarettes, some people went to their competitors, but some people just gave up. How's that for pursuing a just cause? And how's that for courage in the face of a market that isn't yet ready for that infinite mindset? As you can probably tell, I loved this book. There's so much more richness to mine from it. So I may even come back and do it another time with some more insights, but I'm definitely giving it 3 out of 3. I love it. And I think that the infinite mindset is something that every leader in business needs to work on adopting. Thank you. Have a great week, and I will see you next time.